Howdy, guys, and welcome to night 65 of Big Brother Season 23's overnight feed recaps. And welcome to Cliff Notes from outside the Big Brother house and from outside the chicken coop as well. All right, Friday morning. I hope y'all all enjoyed last night's first of two double eviction episodes. Now, let's talk a bit of a refresher. No huge shocks that took place during last night's episode, but let's just set it up before we get into the live feeds. First of all, in the first half of the double eviction, Claire's on the block. Claire goes home on a 4-1 vote. Absolutely no surprise there. We knew it was going to happen. The one vote she got to stay came from Hannah. It was a sympathy vote. We knew we expected that Hannah was going to cast that vote. Hannah did it strictly from a jury management standpoint. It's a good move by Hannah, I think. But Claire is going to find out eventually that they are all working together. And so I don't know if it'll make a huge difference. But Hannah cast the one vote to save Claire. Claire's out the door. After that, we then have our HOH competition. Now, this is a memory competition, but not remembering dates and past challenges and all of that. This is a competition looking at a screen. It has a bunch of comic book type phrases, boom, pow, things like that. Julie told us that this whole week is going to be BB Comics themed, which means Veto Competition should be the BB Comics zip line, which I'm really looking forward to. But this first HOH is a memory competition. And the winner is Hannah. Yeah, Hannah wins the competition. I'm not sure how many people were actually competing in this. There were several people like Xavier who had said, yeah, I'm not really sure I want to win it. But Hannah wins the HOH competition. She immediately puts Alyssa and Xavier on the block. She tells Alyssa, she pulls her off to the side and says, look, Xavier is my target. You're just the pawn. So stay chill. You're okay. Just sit tight. I don't know. I get why Hannah told her that. There was always a possibility that Alyssa could win the veto and still stay in the house. So Hannah's trying to protect herself, cover her bases. But at some point, do you just kind of say, look, it's your time to go? But not quite at this point. Hannah doesn't tell her that. She says Xavier's a target. And so Alyssa seems okay with it. So at that point, we then have the veto competition. The HOH was a memory. The veto is a puzzle competition, putting together a logo of Big Brother. And I got to say, the winner of this competition is Xavier. And Xavier certainly puts his puzzle together a lot faster than Caitlin Herman did during her live episode when she was also tasked with putting a puzzle together. But Xavier wins the veto competition, as he should and as is expected. Xavier immediately pulls himself off the block, leaving an opening. And at that point, Hannah then replaces Xavier with Kyland. So we've got Kyland and Alyssa on the block. And on a 3-1 vote, Alyssa heads out the door. So Alyssa now is headed to the jury house. We have our final six. The final six are the Cookout Alliance. They have achieved their goal of getting 6 African Americans to the very end, of guaranteeing that one of them is going to actually win Big Brother this season. But who has sacrificed their own game? Who is not going to win $750,000? That's a lot of money. Who is not going to win that money because they jeopardized their game in order to make sure that the mission was achieved, which it now has been. So at this point, it's all about who's fighting to the very end, who's going to win this game. And I'm excited. It's been a little predictable so far this season. No more. I think it's going to be a little less uncertain. There's no more big alliance. They're going to have to go after each other. And that's what we've been waiting for, right? We want to see a little more chaos. We're getting ready to get it. I hope so. All right. Before we talk about the live feeds, let's talk a few observations about last night's episode, some of these competitions coming from Old Boss Hog. Just a few thoughts before we move on to the feeds themselves. First of all, if y'all remember, Alyssa thought sending Claire home was at least partially her idea. She thought it was going to be a huge blindside of Tiffany, to see Claire walk out the door, that Tiffany thought it was going to be Xavier. Alyssa was just giddy thinking about pulling one over on Tiffany. Is she going to the jury house still thinking that Claire going home was a huge blindside, that Tiffany's game is disrupted, is hurt because of it? Maybe. She very well may. Being a double eviction, no one really had a chance after that particular eviction to spill the beans to Alyssa to let her know what actually had gone on. So Alyssa probably, as she's heading over to the jury house, is thinking that. Now, once she gets there and she starts comparing notes with Claire, I think things will start becoming a little more clear. But at least for now, Alyssa probably walked out the door The first half of last night, she was probably so excited that things were going just her way. And then the second half, everything comes crumbling down, as sometimes happens in this game. So we've got that. All right, number 2. Hannah replaced Xavier with Kyland. And I'm a little curious why she did that instead of replacing him with Big D. At this point in the game, Alyssa's going home, right? She didn't win Veto. Everyone's going to send her out the door. How would that not happen? So whoever is put up next to her really doesn't matter. They're absolutely the most 100% pawn that you could ever have in this game. So it doesn't really matter. And yet it always does just a little bit for the person who gets picked and starts wondering why they got picked. So why would you put up someone like Kyland, who has shown that he can win some competitions, as opposed to putting up someone like, Big D, who hasn't really shown a whole lot of competitive capability just yet. I'm not really sure what was going into that, because Hannah didn't have real tight connections with Big D that would justify holding on to him instead. But she puts up Kyland. We'll see if that comes back to bite her. Will Kyland kind of keep that in the back of his mind somewhere down the road? I don't know. We're going to find out. Number 3, Xavier winning Veto worked great for Hannah. Hannah had told Alyssa that Xavier was her actual target. So then when Xavier wins Veto and pulls himself off, well, now if Alyssa goes home, it's not really showing Hannah to have been lying about that, even though she was. But Alyssa may have walked out that door still thinking that Xavier was the primary target and that Hannah just didn't have any choice once he pulled himself off the Veto, and it is what it is. She'll find out later, but for right now, she may be thinking about that. And here's the other thing. Because it was a double eviction, she didn't, first of all, it doesn't really matter whether she knows or not that she was the actual target. But because it was a double eviction, because no one had a chance to talk to her about it, again, she may be walking out of the house still thinking that Claire was not the intended target in the first half, and thinking that Xavier was the intended target on the second half, and not having any indication on either one of those. Now, here's the other thing. There's not going to be any goodbye messages for Alyssa, since she's the back half of a double eviction. I know during my season, Christy went home on the back half of double eviction. I know I've had people ask in the past, do you do goodbye messages for her after she's gone? Go back in and do some goodbye messages she watches later. No, we didn't do any goodbye messages. Christy just never got goodbye messages. It's going to be the same thing with Alyssa. So there's not going to be anyone in the Cookout Alliance that's going to be able to kind of spill the beans and give her a little insight or anything else. Whatever Alyssa picks up is going to be strictly from what she learns from Claire and the rest of the jury house. So she's got some information she's going to find out that's going to be a bit of a surprise to her, I think. All right. And finally, one more point before we get into the live feeds. Apparently, Big D had wanted to give another vote to Alyssa so that it would be a tie, and Hannah would then have to break it. Which, if Hannah has to break the tie, that means she votes to send Alyssa out the door. It hurts her jury management with Alyssa, because now Alyssa knows that Hannah chose to send Alyssa out, as opposed to just being forced to because Xavier won the veto. I thought it was a decent move. I didn't know about it until afterwards, but apparently Big D wanted to do that. For some reason, he didn't do it. And we get into the live feeds after the show, and they're kind of talking, arguing about it, what went on as the feeds come back. And so on that note, let's actually talk about the live feeds. So starting off, as I mentioned, we've got Big D and Kylan talking about that vote that Big D wanted to throw out there, whatever. Big D is telling Kylan that, look, you should know that I'm never going to vote against you, Kylan. I'm just not going to do it. So maybe that's why Big D didn't go through with this plan that maybe the two of them had worked out in advance in order just to hurt Hannah's game a little bit. That's a possibility, but I just can't imagine Kylan being upset or being part of a plan that involves him maybe being on the block and it coming down to a tie vote and him having to depend upon Hannah to keep him safe. I just don't see that happening. But we don't really know exactly what was pre-planned or not. Later, Kylan's talking to Hannah and he says, yeah, I didn't really understand Big D's talk about that and giving an extra vote to force you to break the tie and everything else. So I don't know if he had an agreement with Big D or something that didn't quite work out, or he's just covering up with Hannah. He didn't want her to know that they were trying to kind of pull a fast one on her. Don't know, but there's a little discussion between the two of them. I don't think it's major. It's just one of those things that came up. But just an interesting strategy that she could have forced Hannah to break the tie in that position and maybe hurt her game a little bit. I don't think it's a horrible idea. All right, we've got Xavier packing up Alyssa's things to send her home. That's the other tough part. I feel so bad for the person going home the second half of a double eviction because they don't pack up. They go out in such a rush. It's such a shock. They don't have time to kind of walk around and reminisce about the house a little bit and check everything out for one last time. It's tough for that person to head out the door like that. All right, we've got Hannah mentions that she wants to have one-on-ones with everyone since she didn't get the chance to do it during her actual HOH. No, that's not how it works. You don't just have one-on-ones just because you're entitled to it as an HOH and it comes with a crown or something. That's not the way one-on-ones work. People have one-on-ones with the HOH because the HOH has the power. And so you have to kiss up to the HOH a little bit. So you're forced to have one-on-ones because they have a power. Well, Hannah doesn't have the power anymore. Hannah cannot even compete in the next HOH. So she has right now less power than anyone else in the entire house. And yet, even with that, Hannah's wanting to have one-on-ones, and she wants to go through the motions. All right, well, I guess if people are willing to do it, but I sure wouldn't be a whole lot of forthcoming during my conversations because there's not a lot of threats that Hannah can make if you aren't. But Hannah wants to do that. And Kylan wants to have one-on-ones as well with everyone. Yeah, I don't know why, just because he's Kylan. So they're both talking about having some quick one-on-ones before the HOH competition. We do have, as a result of that, Big D is talking to Hannah. He's upset. He's saying that he's upset because he hadn't been able to throw a sympathy vote, a pity vote to anyone that's on jury so far. Smart. Big D smart to be mentioning that. Smart to start driving home the point that you can't win against anyone if you're sitting in that final two chair against anyone else that's left in this house. You know, all these other people. Hannah, you just throw out a sympathy vote to Claire. You should have Claire's support. I haven't thrown a sympathy vote out to anyone. I don't have a chance when I get in there. So we're seeing Big D's strategy really kicking in. At some point, you want to win all these competitions. At some point, when you realize that you really haven't been the comp beast of the season, it may pay off to just start backing off a little bit and just talk about how you were completely haven't done anything in this game. And we're going to see more of that throughout the evening. All right, we do have around 8 o'clock or so of feeds cut for the HOH competition. These double evictions, besides the live episode part, it's just a busy night going on because not only everything we've already seen, now we've got another HOH competition. This one lasts for about 2 hours. And when the feeds finally come back on, we discover that the new HOH for the week is Kylan. Kylan has won his third HOH, and he's not so excited about it. We'll talk about it, but he has said that, or he has won his third HOH. Do you remember just 36 hours ago when Claire said that no one should ever go through another one-on-one with Kylan? Well, I think that applies to the viewers as much as it applies to the house guests themselves. But for you guys, I'll make the attempt. I'll listen to another week of Kylan HOHs and I'll give you all the scoop so you don't have to listen to hours and hours of it in the middle of the night. So yeah, we've got a lot to look forward to this week, don't we? All right, we do have Big D is upset. He's talking to himself, or he's alone and talking. Apparently, he was pretty close to winning this HOH competition. He feels like he was close to winning. We've heard other times where he said, I just one question. I was so close to winning. Well, this one, though, it sounds like maybe it truly was. He was close to winning. It sounds like it had something to do with manipulating an egg somehow. It also sounds like they were probably competing all at once, perhaps, and probably chicken coop kind of competition. Hits the background behind me, which did not come from last night. It's not a screenshot from last night, so just an FYI. But that sounds like it was some kind of egg rolling manipulation of some sort. And Big D's feeling like he came very close to winning this thing. And he may be right, because later we see Kylan talking to Big D, and Kylan is crying. He's apologizing to Big D for winning this competition, knowing that Big D was so close. Now, knowing Kylan, he might have really wanted the win, regardless of what he's saying. he may have really wanted the win just for his own resume and just for a payback to Tiffany for winning her HOH last week, which we know got him a little perturbed as well. So while he's saying he didn't want to win, and I kind of believe him, I also think there's a small part of him that probably is okay that he has taken this as well. But having said that, later he's talking to the cameras and he's saying he hadn't intended to win, that he was just kind of practicing with an egg roll in case he needed to turn it on at the very end and win, because he was worried about Azza maybe putting him up. But it sounds like he's saying that he really didn't intend for this egg to land or place or whatever was supposed to happen. He was just kind of practicing. It happened. He won the competition and he is not happy with it. He's saying if he loses Big Brother, it very well could be because of this event, this competition, this moment where he accidentally won HOH. It's kind of perhaps cratered his whole game. We'll see if that happens or not. I think being in a position of power at Final Six isn't necessarily a bad thing. That means he can't compete next week, and maybe that's what he's worried about. Maybe he thinks he's created too big of a target on his back by being the first Cookout Alliance person that has to go after another Cookout Alliance person. That may be going through his mind. I don't think it's quite as catastrophic as he thinks. Everyone is at risk at this point in the game, but he's worried about it. All right, we've got Kylan talking to the camera some more. He's offering up the idea of putting up Tiffany and Xavier both on the block and just letting them battle it out with each other. You remember, Kylan's kind of been playing all sides. So I can see him thinking that, let me continue playing both sides. Let me put those two up against each other. Go against each other. Just leave me alone. So he's throwing that out there, but then he's saying, man, I'm not going to do that. I just can't do that. Instead, he's going to use his one-on-ones to see how sure he can be that Xavier would actually protect him later and carry him all the way to the end. So based on that, it sounds like Kylan has kind of declared his side. He's coming in on the side of Xavier and kind of the guys as opposed to Tiffany and Hannah. It sounds like at this point in time. Kylan is also talking about the HOH competition. He's saying that she was last in this competition. Isn't that amazing? There's a competition that Tiffany was in last place. Big D was about to win it. I want to watch this competition. I want to see what all was involved with it, because you know that Tiffany was gunning for this comp, right? I know she wanted to win this thing and send one of these guys out the door, and it just didn't work out, obviously. This was a huge HOH, and this veto coming up is going to be huge also. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be BB Comics, which is great. All right, Kylan is saying that he came in wanting to see an African-American win this season of Big Brother, but also wanting to sit in a final two chair against the strongest player in the game, which he thinks is Xavier. All right, Kylan, I'm not sure that's the best recipe for winning this thing. I personally was happy to be sitting in the chair. I was sat in the final two chair with anyone, first of all. But secondly, I would have much preferred to have the weakest player still left versus the strongest player sitting next to me. But Kylan wants to go up against the strongest player and win out against that person. We'll see if you get your wish or not, Kylan. You may, although it may be Big D sitting up against on that chair with Xavier as opposed to yourself, Kylan. I'm not sure that Xavier has the same thoughts that he wants to sit up against the strongest player. I think he may be looking at some different people, Kylan. But we'll see. We will find out. All right, we've got Kylan talking to Azza and asking. Kylan's talking to Azza and saying, look, what is your preference for Final Four? Basically saying, Tiffany or Xavier, who are you siding with? Who do you want to send out the door? Azza's saying, look, I'm okay with either. I'm really okay with either one staying. I'm okay with either one going. Good answer. Non-committal. That's the way you need to be right now. Azza, don't throw yourself out there if you don't have to. But obviously that's not good enough for Kylan. Kylan is telling Azza, saying, look, put your pros and cons together for Tiffany and Xavier and have it ready for our one-on-one discussion tomorrow, which is today. Have all that stuff ready when we talk about it. I need answers from you, Azza. You can't be non-committal. You got to tell me pros and cons for each of them. Another Kylan HOH. These poor house guests. Oh my gosh. How I wish all these house guests would just come together and boycott any meetings with them and say, yeah, no, we've all just decided as a group, we're not giving you anything this week, Kylan. They're not going to do it. That's not the way it works. But Kylan is already giving out homework to all of these other house guests for his one-on-ones with them. Kylan does tell Azza, however, that he's not putting her up, that she is safe this week. She's not going on the block. it's certainly sounding more and more like Tiffany and Hannah are going to go up on the block. I wouldn't have guessed that just a couple of days ago based on how chummy Kyland and Tiffany were, but it sounds like Tiffany and Hannah are probably the two that are going to be going on the block. Interesting. Very interesting. All right, we've got Tiffany talking to Kyland. She's congratulating him, doing what you have to do to the person who's just won HOH. She's telling him how hard she understands being the final 6 HOH is, having to take that first shot at someone else within the alliance. And Kyland is giving her a homework assignment as well. He's saying, look, I want you to think about it. I need you to tell me how you think all the different house votes would go, all the different scenarios inside this house. You need to have that all for me during our one-on-one tomorrow as well. So Tiffany also has her homework assignment. Kyland's talking to Hannah. He's telling her, saying, look, I'm not promising anything right now. I'm not to that point. I'm not promising anyone anything. But at the same time, I'm just telling you, it seems like the target maybe has shifted to Tiffany. So Hannah, you need to be aware that it seems like Tiffany's being talked about more than anyone else. But he is also telling her, he's saying, look, if Big D had won that competition, he would have automatically put up you and Tiffany. I didn't want that. I didn't want it just to be an automatic nomination, and that's why I won. So even though he's saying he won accidentally, he's telling Hannah that he did it to save her from the wrath of Big D, that he was doing it. He's throwing Big D under the bus by saying, hey, he would have gone after y'all. I'm not going to do that automatically. I want to hear everything, and then I'll decide. So he tells Hannah, he gives her homework assignment. He says, look, you need to come up with ways that you can help me get to final 3. We've got to talk about that on the one-on-one. You better have some good ways that you can help me get to the final 3 in order to justify you staying in this house. Man, brutal, just brutal. All right, we've got Big D talking to Xavier. Big D continuing his campaign of, I'm not going to win anything. Big D's telling Xavier, say, look, if the two of us get to final D, I am perfectly happy to walk away with the $50,000 second prize. Is it $50,000 or $75,000? Considering the winner has boosted up. Don't know. Either way, I think Derek would be happy with either amount. But he's saying, I'm not. I know you're going to beat me. I'm not arguing otherwise. You're going to beat me, but I'm happy to take second place at Xavier. I think that's a good strategy for Big D at this point in time, and I think he's probably right. I don't know that Big D is beating anyone in this house at this point in time, unless he just becomes a comp beast for the next few weeks. Yeah. All right, we'll see. If he does, then I give it to him. But I think this is the only strategy that Big D probably has to get to the end. He's saying, look, the only thing I've done in this house so far, I've cooked, I've cleaned. Oh, and I came up with the name Cookout Alliance. So, I did do that. But other than that, I don't have anything else. He says, Xavier, really all I did is I just rode your cocktail. That's all I did. It's his terminology, not mine. I think he meant coattail, but we get it. Big D's always fun with some of his verbal gaffes and such. All right, we've got the house guests sitting around wondering if the jury has figured out the Cookout Alliance, especially as they start comparing notes and stuff. They're thinking Derek X maybe has figured out and told everyone else, but they're wondering about that. They're also wondering what the pre-jury people think as they continue to hear about the Cookout Alliance and the mission and all of that. So a lot of that kind of talk. They're also talking about famous African-American activists and speakers, and each of them is trying to come up with someone that they would want to be or be referred to or assigned to or most similar to, things like that. And so a lot of famous African Americans are brought up as part of that conversation. It's actually kind of interesting to listen to. All right, we've got a bit more light talk, not really huge game significant talk, but just various conversations taking place with different house guests about some of the deals that evicted house guests offered up at different points in time that they had pitched. I talking about Claire making some last minute promises, things like that. Nothing big or earth shattering worth mentioning. Just kind of reminiscing about past seasons. At one point, Tiffany admits that she was the hinky vote from way back in week 1. Everyone pretty much knew it was Big D. They never knew who that second vote is. Tiffany is fessed up. So you get a little spilling of the tea and everything of what's happened so far in the season, as they're just kind of comparing some notes and everything. Now that they feel more comfortable doing it since all the non-alliance members are out of the house. And I get it. But you got to be careful, because those people inside the alliance, they're now your enemies. They're now the ones trying to keep you from getting that $750,000 prize. So you still have to be a little careful with your information. But obviously they're a little bit more relaxed and they're having fun just talking about things they didn't feel comfortable talking about earlier. So we have a lot of that. Again, nothing huge or shattering type information, but they do that for a while. And finally, lights out. I know 4:30, 5 o'clock. Everyone just kind of wanders off eventually and calls it a night around 5 o'clock or so in the morning. So there you have it, guys. Today we're going to have nominations. Again, I think best guess is Tiffany and Hannah end up on the block. Are they going to be upset? Are they going to be surprised? I don't really know yet. I don't have a good feel for it. We'll see what the reactions are afterwards. I think it's going to be an interesting day. So we'll find out what the repercussions are of the nomination ceremony. We'll talk about it all tomorrow morning. So guys, y'all have a fantastic Friday. It's Friday. Enjoy the last day of the work week. I will be back tomorrow. We'll talk all about it then. Till then, SKD 143. Cheers, guys.